China is facing a crisis that makes its property collapse look manageable. The country that builds ghost cities for 80 million people can't provide clean water for 300 million. Every year, 1 meter of ground disappears beneath Beijing's streets as the city literally sinks. Shanghai has dropped 3 meters since 1920. And here's the number that should terrify anyone invested in global stability. By 2030, China will face a 40% water shortage. This isn't a drought. This is the collision between geography, demographics, and an economic model hitting a hard physical limit. The North China Plain supports 25% of China's population with only 3% of its fresh water. Beijing has less water per capita than Saudi Arabia. Scientists estimate groundwater will be depleted within 30 years. 300 million people drink contaminated water daily. 70% of rivers and lakes are polluted. Water tables drop 1 meter every year. And when those aquifers run dry, there is no backup plan. I'm James Whitfield from Faultline Economics. While others chase headlines, we examine the systems that actually shape history, geography, demographics, and economic fundamentals. Today, we're analyzing China's terminal water crisis. This is strategic clarity in a complex world. China's geography presents a fundamental problem no amount of planning can solve. 80% of rainfall occurs in the humid south. The arid north is chronically deficient. This isn't temporary, it's a permanent geographic fault line. For decades, Beijing engineered around this constraint. They built the world's most expensive infrastructure project, the South to North Water Transfer, costing over $70 billion. They constructed massive dams. They pumped groundwater as if it were infinite. But engineering cannot create water where none exists. Climate change weaponizes this divide. Since the 1950s, northern China has lost 20 to 40 millimeters of precipitation per decade. The Yellow River's runoff has dropped over 30%. The south gets wetter, while the north descends into permanent drought. Factor 1. The groundwater mining catastrophe. China extracts over 100 billion cubic meters of groundwater annually, more than 10% of global withdrawals. On the North China Plain, this isn't supplemental irrigation. It's the only thing keeping agriculture alive. Water tables are falling 1 to 1.5 meters every year. Complete aquifer depletion within 30 years. This creates land subsidence. 45% of major cities are sinking. Beijing drops 4 inches annually. Now add rising sea levels. By 2120, 26% of coastal lands could be underwater. Trillions of dollars in economic assets sit in cities simultaneously sinking and facing rising oceans. Factor 2. The agricultural water trap. Agriculture consumes 60% of China's water, fundamentally unsustainable. The North China Plain's winter wheat summer maize rotation requires 800 millimeters of water annually. Regional precipitation? Only 480 millimeters. Every ton of wheat requires 1,000 tons of water and sells for $150. The economic logic is insane. Winter wheat alone creates a groundwater overdraft of 198 millimeters per year. Beijing's response reveals the crisis depth. They've abandoned grain self-sufficiency. China now imports 89 billion cubic meters of virtual water annually, more than the entire Yellow River's flow. They're trading food sovereignty for water survival. And as this dependency grows, China will trigger unprecedented pressure on global agricultural markets. Factor 3. The water-energy-food nexus. China's coal industry consumes 1/5 of national water. 2/3 of coal plants are in the water-scarce north, regions least able to support them. Even the pivot to renewables creates vulnerabilities. During the 2022 drought, Sichuan's hydropower collapsed. Toyota halted production. Foxconn went dark. Cattle stopped operations. Lithium and polysilicon prices spiked globally. This changes the entire equation. A regional drought in China disrupts global supply chains for electronics, EVs, and green energy technology. If you find this analysis valuable, subscribe to Faultline Economics. We dive deep into structural forces shaping our world every week. Factor 4. The South to North transfer gamble. The $70 billion bet that created a single point of failure. This project diverts 44.8 billion cubic meters annually from the Yangtze to the north. For Beijing, it supplies nearly 80% of urban water. But this creates extreme brittleness. The city has become a hydrological island, completely dependent on a 1,200-kilometer aqueduct. Any disruption, drought, infrastructure damage, contamination would plunge China's political heart into existential crisis. Rather than fixing inefficient consumption, the project subsidizes waste. Water tariffs remain 70% below international standards. Beijing chose a techno-authoritarian fix over politically difficult demand management. But all of this hinges on one deciding factor: climate change as threat multiplier. By 2050, temperatures will rise 2.3 to 3.3 degrees, intensifying northern droughts. Tibetan glaciers feeding major rivers will melt, creating a short-term surge followed by long-term collapse. The 2030 threshold isn't a projection. It's a mathematical certainty. Now, let's connect the dots. What happens when Beijing can't provide water to its population? Can any authoritarian system survive breaking the modern mandate of heaven? Drop your analysis in the comments. As internal scarcity worsens, Beijing will maximize upstream retention, weaponizing water against downstream neighbors. The Mekong is already a choke point. China's 11 megadams withheld water during the 2019 drought, devastating Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar. This is water coercion in action. The real flashpoint is the Brahmaputra. China's planned dam, 3 times larger than 3 gorges, sits near the Indian border. New Delhi fears Beijing could weaponize it, releasing massive volumes during conflict to flood India's northeast. For a deeper dive into how authoritarian systems manage resource crises, I recommend The Water Kingdom by Philip Ball. Check it out with the link below. This connects directly to our video on China's demographic collapse. Find that breakdown in the card on screen. So what does this mean for China in 2050? Scenario A. Managed decline. China muddles through at enormous cost. Desalination expands but remains expensive. Virtual water imports accelerate. China cedes food sovereignty, becoming the world's dominant grain importer. Water allocation creates constant interprovincial friction. Tensions with India and Southeast Asia become permanent. Water scarcity becomes a perpetual drag on GDP. Scenario B. System shock. A multi-year drought strikes the Yangtze Basin, the source of 40% of GDP. Hydropower collapses. The transfer to Beijing halts. The North China Plains irrigation fails. National food crisis. Global grain prices skyrocket. Social unrest explodes. The CCP's mandate of heaven faces its ultimate test. The data doesn't lie. 300 million people drinking contaminated water. Aquifers depleting within a generation. a 40% supply deficit by 2030, dependence on a single, vulnerable mega project, and a geopolitical strategy that exports the crisis to neighbors. This isn't a problem stimulus can solve. It's a hard physical limit imposed by geography, accelerated by climate change, and encoded into an unsustainable economic model. Beijing can engineer temporary solutions, but they cannot create water where none exists. For investors, policymakers, and anyone trying to understand the next decade, prepare for a China constrained by water, exporting instability through volatile food imports and weaponized hydrology. The future isn't written, but the blueprint is there for those who know how to read it. If you gain something from this analysis, subscribe to Faultline Economics and give this video a like. We're building more content like this every week. And as always, stay strategic.